Hi, and welcome to 10 Kids, 2 Docs, Parenting Insights from Pediatrician Moms. I'm Dr. Sylvia Bank.
And I'm Dr. Vivian Carlin. Welcome back.
Welcome back. Today we are going to tackle a topic that's very common in early middle school, executive functioning.
Let's jump in.
Welcome to the 10 Kids, 2 Docs podcast. Seasoned pediatricians and longtime friends, Sylvia Bank and Vivian Carlin have counseled thousands of parents and are raising 4 and 6 kids, respectively. Join these doctor moms as they incorporate fun and their combined wisdom and experience to share parenting insights for anyone looking for practical and trustworthy guidance. Please note that this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment from your doctor.
Okay, so executive function is something that comes up a lot in adolescence. It's something we talk about a lot. It's something a little bit difficult to define, although we're going to get into that. But I think what will help most in this discussion is let's start off with a story. Do you have a story that comes to mind of an example of executive functioning in your child? And let's go from there to define it and give advice on it.
Sure. So not all of my children struggled with executive functioning in the exact same way, but one of my children in particular, I have the best stories about executive functioning dysfunctioning, right? Or problems. Yes. So this kind of happened at the time where there was the transition to middle school, where in our school system that's in 6th grade, a lot changes where there's multiple teachers, they change classes for every single period, and they have different homework assignments and different expectations in each different class. So my oldest son definitely struggled during that transition to middle school. And his main problem was the homework, where he definitely struggled initially because all the homework assignments would come back with zeros. Like he would not get any grade on any homework assignment. And there was a dysfunction there. 10% of your grade is homework and you're getting a 0 on that. It really brings down your overall grade. So what's going wrong with the homework for him? Knowing him and seeing what the problem was, we kind of broke down homework for him into a 7-step process.
Ooh, okay, tell me.
That wasn't taking place. So for him, the way that we discussed it, he had to achieve 7 successful steps in order to get a grade that's not a 0 on a homework assignment.
Okay.
And those 7 steps were the following. Number 1, he has to hear the homework being assigned in class. Number 2, he has to write that homework down so he knows that he needs to get it done. Number 3, he needs to bring home the proper material in order to complete the assignment at home. Number 4, when he's at home, he needs to remember to do the homework. Number 5 is doing the homework.
Mm-hmm.
Number 6 is remembering to bring the homework back to school the next day. And number 7 is turning the assignment in. And I think it was good for me and good for him to quantify this problem into the 7 steps. Mm-hmm. Because initially he was failing on step number 1. Like he didn't even know that there was a homework assignment that was assigned. But as a parent, if he is failing on step number 7, the last one where he's done everything and forgot to turn it in.
Right.
That should feel like an improvement, right? Like you've come so far. You've successfully completed 6 out of the 7 steps. But as a parent looking at the grades in the report card, it's still a 0 if you haven't done all 7 of them. So it helped me, I think, in understanding and being more patient with my child in middle school to kind of see progress, even though there wasn't an improvement in the grades for the homework, where eventually I know that he's gone 6 steps, he can make it through that 7th step. And that is kind of like how the executive functioning kind of presented as a problem in middle school for him. I have another funny story to share about working through those steps. So after we kind of started recognizing these are the steps you need to take, one of the big ones was that he would forget to bring the assignment home. Like if you don't bring home the worksheet, even if you remember steps 4 and 5 and 6, if you didn't bring it home, you can't get it done. So he was my only one in middle school and we're walkers. So he would ride his bike to and from school. And sometimes at the end of the day, especially earlier on in the fall, I'd be outside, getting the mail or like doing some yard work, waiting for him to come home. And there was this pattern where it was around the time he was like turning the corner, riding his bike to our house. I'd be out front by the mailbox. He would see me.
Uh-huh.
Realized that he forgot to bring home the worksheet for homework, turn his bike around and just go right back to school to go get it. Like somehow like my face was like this visual aid for him to be like, oh, I forgot to bring home my homework. And then he would go and turn around and go back. And we used to joke, like when you're getting ready to come home at the end of the school day, when you're at your locker, you need to like picture my face. And then it might jog your memory to bring home the material that you need to complete homework for school. So we kind of came up with a lot of little reminders and tricks to try to get him to successfully navigate through these 7 steps.
Okay, there are things I love about this story. So let me start by saying that one of my favorite ways to think about executive function is that there are 3 main executive functions, okay? And I'm going to refer to a handout on the Cleveland Clinic because I think they do a really nice job of explaining these in a logical way. The first one is working memory. The second one is inhibition control. And the third one is cognitive flexibility. Like cognitive flexibility, meaning being able to multitask, being able to switch between activities, being able to change the way that you're doing this math problem when you've been taught to do it one way and now you're being asked to do it another. So cognitive flexibility is an umbrella for all of that. So what I love about your story is that you are describing this working memory, and working memory doesn't necessarily refer to your ability to regurgitate information. You know, like we have flashcards to memorize this data, and then you're going to regurgitate it on a test. That's part of working memory, but often with this executive functioning, it's more of a nonverbal memory. Like when you're sitting in the classroom and you see your teacher at the front, something should remind you of, oh, wait, I have this homework that I am supposed to turn in, especially if it's almost every day I turn in homework. There's something about being in this classroom that should remind me to turn in my homework. Well,
Right.
you know, his transition to like, oh, I made it all the way home and I see mom and I remember, like that nonverbal like memory jogged, like, okay, now it's time. I've got to go get my homework to get it done.
So my story is clearly a story of my son who struggles with memory, right? Remembering things. Do you have any examples from your 6 kids that you want to share?
Yes. Let me give you an example of inhibition control. I did have a child who, from the day he could talk, I mean, he is just so outgoing. From like 1 year old, this child loves to talk, loves to make people laugh, loves to laugh. And that's really a gift to our family. We love that about his personality. That doesn't translate into the same type of love in a classroom where you're supposed to sit quiet, right? Yes. And he was in a school system in 6th grade that was very strict, you know, only speak when you're asked questions, things like that. And he had multiple infractions, they were called, where he would get called down to the office because he spoke out of turn. And I would get called by the teacher and I would always ask, was he being disrespectful? And it was never disrespectful. Like, that's different. It was just this like lack of inhibition control. Like, I need to say something, or there's an opportunity here to make the person next to me laugh, and I just can't get that amount of control not to do it. I just have to blurt it out, right? And I remember at that time, the dean of students who would talk to students when they were called down to the office, he called me at one point, and again, I'm like, was he being disrespectful? No. He was just being silly and having fun, not disrespectful at all. He's very polite now and remorseful. And I remember that man saying to me, I just have to share with you that he just reminds me so much of myself when I was a 6th grader. And I remember thinking like, I'm so glad you said that, because look at you. You're like a highly functioning adult who's making a big difference in the world, right? Yes. Like, allaying my fears as a parent that this child is going to be a non-law abiding citizen because he can't keep his mouth shut when he's supposed to.
Yeah. I think this is a really good example of how inhibition control can lead to executive functioning difficulties.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. And part of that executive functioning, it's a little part of memory too, is that I recognize the consequences of my action and therefore I'm not going to take it because I'm remembering like, oh no, I really shouldn't do this. But in that
Yeah.
moment, there's not enough inhibition control or time to draw that nonverbal memory of, ooh, no, I shouldn't do this right now. Eventually it got there just fine. And,
Yeah.
we went to like 0 infractions ever, but there was that transition period that was a necessary part of normal neurodevelopment for that
Right.
child in particular. In the second half, let's talk about the development of executive functioning in normal neurotypical children.
Yeah.
Because as I listed those 3 things, there's probably a lot of people out there, myself included, that are thinking, okay, wow, you just described my child with ADHD who
Right.
has trouble in all 3 of those. And executive function is a significant difficulty for children with ADHD, also for children with autism, for a lot of children with neuroatypical diagnoses. But let's focus our attention now on just that normal executive function development and talk about tips and tricks and how to help parents.
No, that sounds great.
So we know that executive function is a skill that comes from the frontal lobe, specifically the prefrontal cortex. And we know that that is developing throughout childhood and adolescence, and it doesn't fully reach completion until early to mid 20s, right? There's this rapid development of the prefrontal cortex during adolescence, but that can occur, as with anything, at different speeds and in a different timeline for different children. And it doesn't necessarily correlate with overall intelligence or overall skill. It's just a process of this like complex neural development that's happening in such fast, rapid pace through adolescence. And those skills are going to come into play for children at different times.
Yeah, which is why sometimes children struggle with executive functioning as they transition in middle school and sometimes even high school, whereas other children don't, right?
Yes, yeah. And that's still very neurotypical development.
Absolutely.
What are tips and tricks we can offer for how to get through that?
So, number one, I think as a parent whose child is not transitioning so easily and effortlessly, number one is to appropriately set parental expectation. This is a transition, and all of our children aren't going to transition through these increased needs for executive functioning in middle school flawlessly. And to give yourself a little bit of leeway and give your children a little bit of time to learn how to adjust to this.
Yes, that like one of my mantras in life is if you have low expectations, you're rarely disappointed and often pleasantly surprised, right? But
Right.
yes, I fully agree. This is so important. There should be an expectation that this could be a significant adjustment for any middle schooler. That is why there's often a middle school class that they're required to take that is all about like some type of organizational skill preparing you for high school, right? I
Right.
also think it's super important as parents to resist any temptation for comparison because, you and I have enough children to know that some effortlessly had this just beautiful executive function and some didn't. And it did not necessarily correlate with later academic success or intelligence or anything like that. So that fear of like, oh my gosh, you can't remember to turn in your homework. You're never going to be able to get a job and remember to get there.
Right.
That's false. Like this is, it's a developing process that's normal, right?
And I think it's important also during this middle school transition, as the definition of self and the introspection that kids will often have in this stage of their development, it's important to not be too negative or punitive about a struggle with executive functioning and negatively labeling your child at that time, because it can undermine their self-esteem and sometimes even make them feel like failures when they just need some time to develop, right?
I feel like it's really important that we're not allowing them to be defined by those failures.
Right.
And, one of the stories I loved about your son and what you did is that you enumerated these 7 steps for him so that you could make him aware of how much progress he was making.
Right.
Right. At the end of the day, this is still a 0, but
Right.
wow, you brought the homework home, you knew what you had to do, you got it done, you took it back to school. Like this is a really big step
Yes.
from never even
Yes.
hearing it, right? And I think similarly with my son, with the example I gave, with the talking out of turn, there was a component of like, okay, this is super important. Something needs to trigger in you that there will be a consequence if you speak out of turn and you need to not do it. But we love the fact that you are so extroverted, that you're friends with everybody, that you like to talk, and that you like to make people laugh. I mean, I think in general, this is a skill that continues to serve him well as he transitions through high school, right? So I think it's important that we're not allowing these little failures to be defining for them.
Yeah.
I will say, when we think about tips and tricks for executive functioning, a lot of it is what is referred to as scaffolding, right? This idea of like creating a support system. While the building is being built, the support system is there on the outside. And then as the building goes up, the support system gradually comes down, right? So we're doing these measures to scaffold them while they're developing these skills internally. So, what you described with your son is perfect for that, right? Like you laid out for him, these are the 7 steps that have to happen for you to successfully turn in a homework assignment and not get a 0. That's part of the scaffolding. You're breaking it down for him. You said things like, hey, visualize me at your locker telling you to get your homework out, right? These are principles in scaffolding.
It ties into executive functioning coaching. We hear that a lot in the community. Some parents can come up with those steps on their own, and others you can hire out. Sometimes middle schools will have special seminars or classes for this and assist your child through that process.
Yeah, I want to make 2 points about executive functioning coaching. The first is, I think, especially at these ages and even into high school, any effective executive function coaching should involve the parent as well, right? Because these are principles that the parent would be instituting at home to help the child succeed. I also think it's important to make the distinction that this isn't the same as therapy. When we use the term therapy, we're often talking about cognitive behavioral therapy, as in, let's sit down and talk about how you were feeling, talk about the consequences of your actions, right? And because this is actually, it's a deficit in a developing neurologic system, it's not as simple as saying to your son, for example, let's talk about the 0, right? There's a consequence for this not happening because in truth, your son probably already feels the remorse of that. It's not something that he can cognitively just change. It is a process of getting the system to develop in place for him to be able to do it. It wasn't defiant. I think there needs to be a distinction there that this executive function coaching is a little bit different than just traditional behavioral therapy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the last tip that I would give is to give your child space to develop their own methods and their own organization, their own tips and tricks as well. You've identified the problem. There's parental pressure to solve this problem, be it stop getting 0s on homework, stop getting sent to the principal's office, right? There is a goal to be met here. And through executive functioning coaching or tips, you can outline for the child a method that they can do to help improve. But sometimes children develop their own methods as well. And even if it's not exactly what you would want as a parent for them, it seems less efficient. It doesn't seem like it's that practical. The fact that they're developing their own method and their skill, I would advise parents to give their children the space to do that without too much intervention as they're trying out their own executive functioning techniques. So my oldest son, every year they're given one folder for their school. It says their school name on the front. It's a little bit thicker and a little bit bigger. And things get from that folder into your math binder or your English binder. But he started using that as everything was just put in chronologically in this folder with no rings or no binding. They were just stacked. And at the end of the year, the folder was like this thick of every single, not divided into subjects,
not divided into
every
subject.
Single paper.
Yes,
and,
like this makes my skin crawl.
Yes,
I don't understand.
I can just imagine, like if he dropped this folder on the ground and the hundreds of papers just went everywhere. I mean, you can, as a mom, like envision the disaster of where is the homework I need to turn in now? And I actually wound up building off of his original thought where we transitioned to the accordion file from that.
Oh.
Where I personally, if I were doing it as a type A mom, I'm thinking back to my middle school, the little hole punch, the reinforcements
Yep.
into a 3-ring binder. Like, this is my vision of what I want this child to do. And, 7 steps, honestly, is never going to get that child there. So we wound up taking his large folder and I suggested an accordion folder. So at least each class is divided chronologically. So like you would just throw it in the top of the folder, you just throw it in the front of the accordion for that class. And then the accordion also has like a little flap and you can close it. And if you drop it, your papers don't scatter to the wind. So, I kind of used his organization, suggested how to augment that to be a little bit less error prone. It was a balance of what he wanted to do and what made me cringe into something where we both kind of felt comfortable.
There is a freedom of, well, you need to develop the system that works for you.
Right, right.
So hopefully on this episode, we've given some practical examples for parents, particularly for the parents who are feeling worried out there of, ooh, my child is having difficulty in this. Is this a sign of some more long-term problem, which often it's not, as well as just some like tips and tricks for how to deal with that.
Yeah.
I also want to acknowledge this is very hard. We talk about this when we talk about letting our kids fail, but here in Texas, there are a lot of middle school classes that go on to the high school transcript. Algebra 1, geometry, any foreign language, all of that can be taken in middle school and goes on to the high school transcript. And I know parents around me feel that pressure because our big state universities have a cutoff that is an automatic admission based on your GPA. Well, if you have 5 or 6 middle school classes going on to your high school transcript, that's a significant load onto your GPA that's determining those state school admissions. And I confess as a parent, it's really hard to let those zeros go, right?
But honestly, if your scaffolding for your child to have middle school success is pretty much you reminding them, doing it for them, if the scaffolding is you doing it, then your child is never learning how to do it on their own. And when the scaffolding gets removed, your child is not better off at that point, right?
Right. So the problem is with the system, right? It's not with the child taking time to develop the skill. It's a system that is creating pressure for need for perfection at those younger ages. Like we just, as parents, have to let that go.
I agree too. I think that the focus should be on that eye on the prize. Like, will they be a functioning adult? Can they hold a job and get their tasks done? Like, that is what we're working on, not perfection in grades at the cost of your child never developing the skill or your child having negative self-esteem. So this has been a great conversation for me, just a walk down memory lane. We laugh at the stories now, but at the time it was frustrating as a parent and created a lot of worry in the child that is struggling with executive functioning. And hopefully this episode will help parents understand that a lot of us are in this same boat and maybe even laugh or enjoy the process. And when these goals have been achieved, to appreciate how far a child has come. So this is 10 Kids, 2 Docs. I'm Dr. Sylvia Bank.
And I'm Dr. Vivian Carlin. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Thank you for listening to 10 Kids, 2 Docs, hosted and created by Sylvia Bank and Vivian Carlin. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and recommend our podcast to other listeners. Visit our website at 10kids2docs.com, where you can find links to social media and leave comments or suggestions. Back next week with more topics in parenting.